there ever been an instance where you were forced to do an entirely unexpected action that made you ask questions about everything? That's exactly what occurred to me. I've always loved animals, especially horses, and our bond is something really special. However, things have recently taken an unexpected turn when my husband, who is always the curious one, suggested that we do something completely out of my comfort zone. I knew he occasionally had some crazy ideas, but this was beyond anything I could have imagined. I never thought my husband would ask me to do something so crazy with our horse. But here we are about to reveal it all. I'll admit that I was apprehensive about being on camera, especially doing something so unusual. But there was something in his voice that made me feel like I had to give it a shot. Imagine it began as a typical day, just another quiet afternoon on the farm, where we had been taking care of the horses and enjoying the peaceful surroundings when my husband got this glint in his eye. He started talking about filming some content with the horse, something fun and different. At first, I thought it was just another one of his eccentric ideas, but as he persisted, it became apparent he had something else in mind. I agreed to give it a try, but what he asked me to do next was where things started to feel a little weird. I couldn't believe it when he said it aloud, but trust me, it will be worth it. So there we were, getting ready to do something that would test me in ways I hadn't anticipated. And as I stood beside our horse, feeling the tension in the air, I wondered if I had made the right choice. Was I ready to do this? Was I about to cross a line I couldn't get back from? As I stood there looking at the camera, I couldn't help but feel a strange mixture of excitement and fear. I've always trusted him. He's my partner and best friend. And even though I'm usually the more careful one, there's a part of me that's always been willing to step out of my comfort zone when it comes to us. However, this time I wasn't sure if I was ready. He kept saying it would be fun and that we could create something special together. But my gut told me this was going to be more than just a simple video. You might be asking, why don't you just walk away and leave it at that? They appeared oblivious to the stress roiling around us as they stood placidly in the stable. Since horses are such perceptive creatures, and I've always believed that they can sense our emotions, perhaps this is why I began to doubt myself. The last thing I wanted was to place my faith in something with which I wasn't entirely comfortable, especially when it involved our cherished horse. But my husband persisted. He had this vision in his head and was determined to make it come true. As he adjusted the camera, he gave me a comforting smile and said, "It'll be fine." But there was a glimmer in his eyes that I couldn't quite place. It wasn't a normal, "everything will be okay." I couldn't help but wonder how far he would go to capture the ideal shot, since there was something deeper there. My husband asked me the question that changed everything, and my pulse raced as his voice shattered the silence, his words hanging in the air like a challenge. I had to decide whether to trust him and take that leap or to back out. The tension between us was almost palpable. "I need you to do something with the horse. It will be fantastic, I promise." I could sense the pressure of his expectations, but I couldn't get rid of the notion that this wasn't just a straightforward request. The camera was already rolling, the lights were set up, and there he was, with that expression in his eyes that always made me feel like I had to follow whatever crazy idea he had next. However, this time felt different. There was a certain intensity to the whole situation. It wasn't just about making a fun moment for the camera anymore. It seemed like something deeper was at play, something I couldn't quite understand. The horse, meanwhile, stood motionless, as if sensing the growing tension between us. And I couldn't help but reflect on how our relationship had always been so pure. He wasn't just an animal, he was part of our family. And here I was, going to do something I wasn't totally sure of with the one creature that had always represented peace and trust in my life. I tried to calm myself by taking deep breaths, but my mind was racing with questions like why it felt like my husband was pressuring me into something I wasn't ready for, and what the purpose of this video would be. Would viewers understand the intention, or would they judge us? As I turned to look at him and tried to interpret his countenance, I noticed a flare of something beneath his normally cheerful demeanor. Was it joy or something darker? I could already picture the inquiries, remarks, and scrutiny. Before I could say anything, he moved closer, his voice lowering. "You know you can trust me, right?" I couldn't place it. I felt an uneasy twist in my gut. "You can trust me," but the more I considered it, the more it didn't sit right. Why did he need me to trust him so badly? What exactly was he planning? My nerves were on edge. Every muscle in my body tensed as I stood there staring at the horse, willing myself to calm down. My husband sensed my hesitation and came over and put a hand on me. I nodded, but doubt lingered in my mind. This is going to be amazing. It's not just about the video. It's about breaking limits. We've always done things together, right? And this time is no exception. His touch on my shoulder was warm, but there was a hint of something uncomfortably abrupt. I forced a smile, but something in the back of my mind constricted. This time, it wasn't just about creating a film. It seemed like something much more intimate that extended beyond the camera. His tone was almost compulsive, and something didn't feel quite right. Telling myself I was overanalyzing things, I attempted to ignore the emotion. But each time I looked at him, I could see the tension. The camera was focused on us, the lights cast harsh shadows, and the world around us seemed to fade into the background. My pulse quickened, and I had no idea what was going to happen next, but my heart was pounding in my chest. Every instinct told me to back off, but I couldn't because the camera was rolling, and he was staring at me like that. This was the moment when everything would change. I looked at the horse, then back at my husband, my mouth drying, and a single question raced through my mind. My thoughts spun as I stood still, unable to get rid of the feeling that something wasn't right. What had I gotten myself into? My husband was standing beside the horse, his hand resting gently on its mane and speaking to it in soothing tones as if everything was normal, but I could feel it in the pit of my stomach. Then, the horse, who had always been calm and predictable, suddenly shifted. His body tensed, his ears flicked back, and his eyes widened with alarm. I instinctively took a step back, my heart skipping a beat. Something was off. The calm, trusting animal I knew so well was now acting as though he could sense the tension building. My husband, who was still unaware of the tension building, smiled and said, "It's okay, just go ahead. He's used to this." But his words only made me more anxious. Why was he so sure? Why was he so certain that everything would go smoothly? I wasn't convinced. I tried to calm the horse, but he pulled back, shifting anxiously on his hooves, my hands shaking as I tried to get him into position. This wasn't how he was acting, and this wasn't the horse I knew. Suddenly, the doubt that had been gnawing at me burst into full-blown panic. "Perhaps we ought to halt," I said, barely raising my voice above a whisper. But my husband's reaction was unexpected. He looked at me with frustration in his eyes, and his tone was sharper than before. It was obvious that this wasn't just about the video anymore. There was something more than a simple stunt being told to me. And as the tension in the air increased, I realized that I might be in deeper trouble than I had ever imagined. Demand loomed over me like a black cloud, and for a brief moment, I was unable to breathe because my hands were still shaking. The camera was recording every second of uncertainty that I couldn't conceal, and the horse was becoming more agitated. His muscles were twitching as if he could sense the growing tension between us. I knew something had to change because this wasn't just a simple video. It had become a test for which I wasn't ready. I tried to calm the horse again, but he was restless, eyes darting around, and my own anxiety was only making matters worse. "Just believe me," he urged, his voice cold now, as if the playfulness had turned into something much more intense. I looked at the camera. The lights were blinding, and the noise from the camera was too loud in the quiet barn. I felt sick to my stomach as I realized the full weight of what was happening. My husband wasn't just making a video. He was pushing me into something that was outside of my comfort zone and my boundaries, and I was afraid of the consequences. Then, unexpectedly, the horse reared back, shocking us both. I stumbled backward, falling hard on the floor, and my husband hurried to the horse, demanding that I get up. Something clicked, and I decided that I would no longer allow him to control me. The tension had finally reached its breaking point, so I got up, picked myself up, and looked him in the eyes for the first time. "This isn't about the video, is it?" I asked him, and his face changed for a moment, showing me a hint of guilt for the first time. But before I could process it, the camera moved, And the truth came crashing down. It wasn't just the video he'd been pursuing. It was about manipulating me and seeing how far he could push me. At that point, everything changed, and I had to decide whether to let him win or to finally take authority. The camera continued to roll, but I realized that the only thing left to record was the truth. I stood there for a moment, staring at my husband while the tension between us simmered, and my heart continued to race. But now I had clarity in my mind. The camera continuing to roll seemed almost inconsequential in comparison to what had just happened. I couldn't just follow his lead any longer. I couldn't just be a part of his vision if it meant losing myself in the process. I had to take charge of this situation on my own. My spouse's face as he stared at me shifted from frustration to something I couldn't quite place. His voice was softer now, with a hint of confusion, but there was no turning back because I could see the truth in his eyes. He had manipulated and put pressure on me the entire time, using the camera, the horse, and our trust to control the narrative. It wasn't about making fun of me. Rather, it was an attempt to see how far I would go, and I had reached the limit. Don't forget to subscribe for more exciting stories. Give this one a thumbs up, and share it with your friends and family who love a good tale too. See you in the next video, and keep exploring life's adventures.